Today's episode of Morning Coffee with Cameron is brought to you in part by Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle is a web creation service designed specifically for artists and musicians. Not only is it a great way to make a good-looking and functional website, it's also a great way to start making an income off your music, because all of your sales, from your tracks to tickets to your shows to your sample packs, are 100% commission-free. If you're ready to get started with your website, you can use my link down in the description to get a free 30-day trial and save 15%. Let's see if this sounds familiar. It's writing day, and you've got your coffee freshly brewed, your inspiration gears turning, and you head into the studio to make a bunch of ideas that ultimately go nowhere, if you even come up with any ideas at all. And after sitting in front of the DAW for hours, you walk away feeling nothing other than pissed off and unaccomplished. While artists all around you seem to be swirling in new releases and big announcements, you're stagnating on a works in progress folder full of projects so old they're probably getting ready to buy their first car. And that's when it really sets in. Is this really it? Have you peaked already? What is this secret these artists have who seem to have endless inspiration? Are you just not cut out for the business? Is it time to pack it in and start selling stuff off? What is all this gear even worth now? And how much time have you wasted on this whole music thing? What was it all for? And maybe this leads to the bigger question, what the f is your problem? Howdy doody, buckaroonies. I have had the weirdest case of writer's block for a while now. It's not like I can't write music. I write music all the time, whether it's for things like sample pack demos or product release demos or media composing gigs or other client projects. I'm always churning out something. But when it comes time to work on my own music that gets released under my, I guess, sort of official umbrella, I feel like I'm standing on the edge of this very steep cliff, and it feels impossible to take that next step forward. My latest album just recently came out, and now that it's time for me to, I guess, start moving towards the next thing, I don't know what I want to do, and I find myself once again on the edge of that very familiar cliff. But after a long, hard think about it, I think I finally figured it out. The big secret is, when it comes to music for clients, I just don't care as much. Let's rip off the Band-Aid here and get it right out in the open. As much as you may want to convince yourself that it's true, sitting in front of the DAW all day making the perfect 8-bar loop is not the same as actually making music. But what's the holdup? What is the difference between an idea and an idea that turns into a completed track? And why is it that when you were a beginner, you could throw out seemingly endless piles of music, but now that you have so much more experience, it's become that much more difficult? Well, it's fear. If you think about it, when you're a complete amateur, you're just having fun with the creative process. The track is done when it's done, then you rinse your hands of it, throw it away, and move on to the next one. I think it's time we maybe take the idea of producing like an amateur and redefine what that really means instead of thinking of it as a bad thing, because when you think about it, the amateur mindset at its core is about one thing: getting done. Making music is pretty difficult. First, there's the matter of even coming up with an idea, and then you have to find out if it's an idea even worth pursuing. But how do you know if you don't try? The problem, and where I think the real disconnect is for a lot of us, myself included, is that the act of trying alone is a pretty monumental task. First, you need to lay down the basic idea, choose the right sounds and samples, arrange the track, mix those ideas together with the right levels, balance everything out with EQ and compression, add some creative effects and transitions, double check your arrangement, work on new sections and alternate ideas, and then master it to really hear it in its final form. And then and only then can you objectively listen back to it and figure out if it's a good idea. After all this, inevitably comes the torrential flood of questions and self-doubt. Does this actually sound good? Is this really the right mix? Did you choose the perfect kick drum sample that conjures up all the emotions you want to touch on in this track? Is the chorus catchy? Is this song maybe a bit boring? And is there anything else you could do differently? And worse, when everyone else hears this, are they going to know it sucks as bad as you do? So maybe at this point, it's time to turn elsewhere for a bit of inspiration. We all know that social media is bad for us, but I think for artists and creatives, it can be even worse. It seems every time you open your feed, you're flooded with achievements and new releases, record label deal signings, tour and show posters, and pictures of everyone grinding away, perfecting their craft while you're sitting there caught in the infinite swipe, wondering what went wrong for you. So now maybe you flip over to YouTube to watch some tutorials and gather some new ideas. Once again, you find yourself inundated with immaculate studio setups, endless flows of creative ideas and music, flashy editing, tons of new techniques, plugins, and gear to explore, and a looming sense that you're never going to be able to accomplish or understand even a fraction of what these artists and creators have, since they seem to be able to so effortlessly create something seemingly on the fly. Now, at this point, something has to be off. So maybe you head over to the bookstore and find some kind of self-help book to help you unstick your head from your but once again, you find yourself marveling at the presence of such simple and genuine profundity, and you feel like a complete failure in comparison for not having realized or implemented any of these ideas on your own. So you decide maybe it's time to find some inspiration elsewhere, and you open your favorite album or playlist, you hit play, and you're floored by these breathtaking soundscapes, the punchy and tasteful sound choices, the living and organic dynamics, the masterful arrangements, and the dread of feeling like you'll never be able to make something on this sort of level. This is what I like to call the highlight paradox. There's a side of ourselves that we share with pride, and there's another side of ourselves that is covered in the blood, sweat, and tears it took to get to those moments. As an artist, obviously, it's going to be more beneficial for you to talk about and share the one really good song you made than it is to talk about the 20 other songs you abandoned because they sucked absolute monkey nuts before you got to that point. It's extremely rare that we are provided with a realistic look into the truth of the creative process. Think about it. Would you really still enjoy your favorite artists if they released every single track and idea they ever had? Would Ansel Adams be Ansel Adams if we saw every photo he'd ever taken? Would you still trust that oh-so-handsome YouTuber if they shared every video idea they've ever had, or showed you how much they might struggle with their own ideas behind the scenes instead of seeing that polished end result every time? When it comes to sharing our work with the world, we always want to put our best foot forward, but is it the right foot or the left foot? Here's a bit of a secret for you I'm not sure I've ever shared here. One time I wrote a track called The Oracle, and I was really frustrated with this track. I just couldn't get it right, so I bounced out a rough copy of the mix and I sat on it for over a month before I would go in and try to do the final mix down. As fate would have it though, I accidentally deleted the project folder while cleaning off my computer's desktop, and there was no way for me to recover it. So I had two options. I could just throw the track away, or I could release it and see what happens. So I said, fuck it, and I released the track in its rough state. Funny enough, it became one of my best performing tracks at the time. It got featured on different playlists and in different videos, and was even signed to one of my favorite labels. And this taught me probably one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned in my career in music. People don't give nearly as many fucks as you think they do. So why is it then that we constantly feel like nothing is ever done or ready? And more importantly, how do we get over it? Let's circle back to my own version of this problem. Why is it that I can write endless amounts of music for everyone else, but when it comes to writing my own music, I face so many challenges? The real answer is that when I'm working on these client projects, I don't find myself subjected to the same sense of paralyzing fear when it comes to working on the music, because in the end, it's a track that doesn't really feel like it's mine. This lesson really hit home for me a couple of weeks ago when I was asked to do a demo track for a preset bank I'd worked on, but this one was a little different. It was going to be a video and released under my own name, of course, on my own channel. But despite all that, I had no problem at all coming up with this track. In fact, it probably took me longer to practice it, set everything up, and film it and edit it than it did to make the actual track itself. And even all that stuff only took me a couple of hours. I'm certainly not saying this was the greatest track of all time or anything, but I found myself once again back at that point of The Oracle. I just put it out as it was, and nobody cared about any of the things that bothered me with it. But more importantly, when it came time to create the track, I also found myself barely bothered by anything during the creative process. With all that in mind, I think I finally have an answer to this big question, and over the last couple of weeks, I've put together a short list of points that I think will help you get out of the loop zone and over the finish line. Try cutting distractions and excuses. Although tutorials can be helpful, they pull you away from your session, and I find that they can often have the opposite effect when the goal is to be creative and end up finishing something because you're always going to be trying some new idea. During your sessions, silence your phone and remove any kind of distractions, and better yet, delete all the social media apps off your phone. They really don't do you much good. Make sure things are set up and in order when you go in to create. So take a moment to take care of anything that needs done, like taking out the trash, letting the dogs out, or anything like that before you head into the session, no matter how short that session might be. Pick one idea and stick to it. An overloaded work in progress folder is just going to be a pile of ideas staring you in the face and reinforcing the idea that you can't ever finish anything. So delete the junk. Take a day to go through and listen to everything in your work in progress folder. And if it's something you're not feeling, just throw it away. Put the rest of them in a finishing pile and you've got your goalposts set. From here, pick one track from the pile and finish it. This is especially helpful if you don't know where to get started from, since you're not working from a blank slate, but a rough starting point. Even if the track sucks, you have to finish it, and at the very least, you'll know the idea wasn't worth doing, and you've probably learned a few lessons on what went wrong that you can hopefully take into your next session to make it a success. Try to simplify everything. It's really hard for a track to sound big when it's drowned out in too many layers and too much ear candy. Don't be afraid to just go with what works. Try laying down the core idea as quickly and efficiently as possible. Not only does this make the track get done faster, but it makes you make better and more conscious decisions on what sounds truly work best together to create a finished product that feels refined. If you're like me and you struggle with layering way too much, give yourself some kind of artificial limit. You would be amazed at what you can do with something like 8 to 16 really well-chosen tracks. A lot of iconic music was made with a lot less. Removing option paralysis. When you work, pick 3 to 5 different plugins to use and write the core of your track with those. Then maybe pick 3 to 5 more to finish it out. Try getting out a notebook and writing down at least 3 goals for your session. Defining the purpose of your session early on can help make it more productive rather than ending up just aimlessly wandering about in the DAW. Don't be afraid to stick to presets too and things that are just ready to go rather than getting lost in designing new sounds. It's really helpful to try and separate these two processes. Try setting a time limit. The Pomodoro technique is really effective. What you do is work in intervals followed by a short break, something like 40 minutes on and 10 minutes off. This forces you to work on this sort of artificial deadline, and it's best to be absolutely strict about it. You end up working horizontally instead of vertically, and that is progress. When you end up taking a break with this method, it's a good way to refresh yourself, and it keeps ideas flowing and gets you excited to dive back into the session rather than feeling like you're chained to the desk. This also works in a broader sense to just generally light a fire under your ass and get things done. Maybe give yourself a week to finish 3 songs using this method. And above all else, try giving a few less f***s. One thing I tell myself all the time is don't think, do. Self-censorship is really what kills the majority of ideas. There's always time to second-guess yourself, but it's hard to do that accurately and objectively when you're not second-guessing the whole picture. It's easier to work from a track that's 80% finished than a track that hasn't even got the intro or the first drop done. Try making a general vomit pass on the track and put every idea that comes to mind down and then refine the result. It's really important to remember here that the real end listeners don't care about all the technicalities, so neither should you. If it sounds good, it is good. There's really nothing wrong with a track that works, and you'd be surprised at how low that threshold actually is. In the end, it's most important to remember that people don't see the process and the failures along the way. They're only going to see the end result. Despite our inclinations as artists and creators to not admit that we're a work in progress, this is always the case with any kind of creative or artistic endeavor. Our failures are not what define us, but they are part of what builds us up into that public-facing image that we all curate so meticulously. Finishing music doesn't have to be so hard, and I think the fear that gets in the way of a completed idea is often an irrational one. If there's one takeaway here, let it be this: done is better than perfect, because perfect is never done. If you've got some other tips or strategies that weren't shared in this video for turning ideas into completed projects, feel free to share those down in the comments below. And with that, I guess we're done here. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And as always, I hope this inspires you to get out there and make something awesome.